Again, it's a rich thing.
What is going on, guys? Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to build a graphical user interface chat in Python. So let us get right into it. I can call myself Florian here. And first of all, you can see that I get the message Florian connected to the server. And here I can say hello, hello world, and so on. And now I can disconnect here and disconnect here as well. All right, so let us get started with the easy part first, because the server doesn't need a graphical user interface. We just need to set it up so that it works, because the basic idea here is that we're going to have a server and multiple clients connect to that server. And this server is just the main point. We don't need a graphical user interface there. The clients are going to connect to the server and then they can communicate with each other. So they're not communicating one-on-one. They're not communicating like client A directly with client B. They're both communicating with the server, and the server is broadcasting the messages. So that's what we're going to build. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import socket, we're going to import threading, and then we're going to set some constants. So the host that we're going to host this on is localhost in this particular video, which is 127.0.0.1. It's also for you, localhost is just a general localhost IP address. And the port that we're going to use here is 9090. Now, of course, if you're running this online, you should always enter your own IP address here, which you can find with ipconfig in the command line on Windows or with ifconfig on Linux. I also think on Mac. And you wanna add your private IP address here. And when someone connects to your server, they need to add the public IP address. They need to specify the public IP address, which you can find on various sites like myip.is, for example. So we need those two values, and then we're going to say socket, or actually server equals socket.socket, socket of the type internet socket, so AF-INET, and a TCP socket, so sockstream, and then server.bind to a tuple of the host and the port. Then we say server.listen, and what we're going to do here is we're going to have an empty list of clients and an empty list of nicknames so that we can manage those. So this is a basic setup for our server. So after that, we're going to need three functions. The first function is going to be a broadcast function, which just means a function that sends one message to all the connected clients. The second function is going to be a receive function. This is what we're going to call it, which means that this is going to be the function that is going to accept new connections. It's going to listen and listen and listen and accept new connections, new clients connecting. And then we also need a handle function, which is going to handle the individual connections to the client. So the receive function is going to wait for new connections. So for example, client A connects to the server. This is going to be accepted by the receive function. But then once client A is connected, the whole connection and the handling of the connection is going to be part of the handle function here. And we're going to define those as functions and not just scripted here, because we need to run those things in different threads, because we want to do many things at once. We don't just want to have one main thread. We want to have many different threads running at the same time. So we want to receive new connections while at the same time handling 10 different client connections that are already there. Now, the most simple function here is the broadcast function. We just say broadcast message. And then what we do here is we just say for client in clients, for every client that is connected, we're just going to say client.send, and we're going to say message. Now, I'm not sure at this point if we need to encode it here or if we're going to encode it when we pass it. I think it's probably more reasonable to encode it when we pass it to the broadcast function. So we're going to just pass an already encoded message here, and we're going to send it directly through all the clients. All right, so the receive function is not that simple. It's not as simple as the broadcast function, but it's also not too complicated. This function is going to run in the main thread. So we're going to run multiple handle functions, multiple handle threads, but this receive function is going to be the main function running in the main thread. And this is because it accepts new connections, and it's the first function that we're going to call. We cannot handle something if it's not connected first. So we're going to say def receive, and we're going to run a while loop here. So while true, you could also, of course, do signal handling or something, but we're just going to do while true for now. We're saying while true, we're going to accept new connections. So client and address of that client is going to be server.accept. Accept returns client and server address, and then we accept the connection, and we have this new client here. So for this, we can just go ahead and say print connected with, and now we can print the address here. So connected with address. But this address, I think, is not a string, so we probably need to say string here. So typecast it to a string. And once we have that, what we're going to do is we're going to add the client to the client list, or to the clients list. We're going to say clients.append client, but one thing that we probably want to do before that is we want to ask for the nickname, and then we want to add this nickname to the nicknames list. So what we're going to do is we're going to say client.send. Now, this is important right now. We are not the client, but we need to use the client socket. This is what we get here as a return value from the accept method. We need to work with the client socket because that's the thing that we can use to send stuff. We don't say server.send because server is just the thing that accepts new connections. It's just a host. The client socket that we have here is the one that we use for communication with the client. So we need to say client send, and what we're going to send here is we're going to send a keyword in uppercase letters, nick, and this keyword is going to signal to the client that we're requesting the nickname. Now, this is maybe not the most professional way to do this, but the idea is that the client is going to check, okay, is the message that I now got nick in capital letters? And if that's the case, it's going to answer with a nickname that the client wants to choose. So we're going to encode this here as UTF-8. And what we're going to get as a result is the nickname. So we're going to say, I mean, hopefully, if the client behaves properly, we're going to say nickname equals client.receive 1024 bytes, and then we're going to append those things as well. So, or this nickname as well. Nicknames.append nickname. Now, what you probably notice here is that nickname and client are always going to end up in the same position in their respective list, unless, you know, some errors happen and we remove one thing and not the other thing. But if we add client 1, we also have nickname 1, so we can use the index to see which nickname belongs to which client. This is a very good feature. I don't know, it's probably also not the most professional feature because, you know, you just need to pop one element out of the clients list, and then it no longer works because the whole thing is messed up. But yeah, so what we're going to do then is we're going to say nickname of the client is, I mean, if we're interested in that, we don't need to print this, but nickname of the client is, and then we're going to say nickname. So this is a server message. This is not sending this to all clients. This is just, print is always a server message. When we want to send something to multiple clients, or to all the clients, we're going to use a broadcast method. And this is what we're going to do in the next line. We're going to broadcast to everyone that this nickname has now connected. So we're going to say nickname, we need to use a string here, nickname connected to the server. Or you could also say joined the chat or anything like that. And we're going to use \n here, and we're going to encode this also with UTF-8. And once we're done with that, we're going to send to the client the message that this client, to this particular client, not to all the clients, to this particular client, we're going to send the message that it's now connected to the server. So connected to the server, encode UTF-8. And what we're going to do then, this is not something that we have done yet, we have to go ahead and create the handle function before the receive function here, because we are going to need that function. So we're going to say handle, we're going to pass a client here, because the handle function is going to take a client as a parameter so that we can also run threads with this, and we're going to pass for now. But what we're going to do once the handle function is done is for each client that we now have this connection with, we're going to say t, or actually let's call it thread, is going to be threading.thread with a capital T, and the target function is going to be the handle function. And we're going to also pass parameters, and args equals client and a comma. A lot of people ask why we pass that comma. This is because we want this to be treated as a tuple, because otherwise it's not going to be treated as a tuple. This just makes it a tuple. This is the only reason why you add that comma in the end. Now, what we do then is we say thread.start, and this is all we need to do. We now only need to implement the handle function. All right, so the handle function is also not too complicated. We run a while true loop here, and we try something which, if it doesn't work, leads us to an except block. And here we do some error handling. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get a message from the client by saying client message equals client dot receive, but like that, recv, not receive, not this function here, but the client function, we're going to receive 1024 bytes. If this fails, we're going to do some error handling, but if it works, we're going to broadcast this to all the clients connected by saying broadcast message. Now you can also lock the message here by just saying print, and we could say f nicknames. And now we would need an index here. Now, how do we get the index? This is a little bit more complicated. We would have to take this client here, and we would have to find out which index in the clients list it is, and then we could also take that index and get the nickname. So what we would do is we would say nicknames clients.index client, like that. And then what we would do is we would say this client is saying something, so it says message, for example. So this is how we could lock this. Now, yeah, this is how we do it. We lock this message here on the server side. This is not what we send to the clients. This is just what we print on the server console log, and this is what the pure message is what we send to the clients, to the individual clients. So what if we get an error here? What we want to do if we get an error in the handling here, so if somehow this client disconnects or it crashes or anything, what we want to do is we want to remove it from the nicknames list and from the client list. So what we do is we say the index of this client is clients.index clients. We want to know at which position this client actually is, and then we're going to say clients.remove clients, client actually, and then client.close, so we close the connection. And what we also do is we say nicknames dot, what do we call this? Nicknames. Yeah, actually we need to say nickname equals nicknames and the index of the client. And then we have to say nicknames dot remove nickname. Or I'm not sure if nicknames doesn't have a pop function or something. I think with pop it should work as well. But since I did it like that in the code that I'm seeing here on the second screen, we're going to do it like that. But I think pop is maybe a better solution here. However, you want to remove the nickname, you want to remove the client, and once you have that, you want to break out of that while true loop, which will automatically end the thread, because then the whole function was executed and the thread stops. Now, the last thing that we need to do here is we just need to call the method receive, and that's all we need to do, because the receive method itself is calling the handle method, which is calling the broadcast method. So this is all we need to do. Optionally, we can also say print server running, like that. All right, so let's get started with the client. The first thing here is we're also going to import socket. We're going to import threading. And we're also going to import tkinter, which is the graphical user interface library of Python. It's part of the core Python stack. And then we're also going to say tkinter.scrollText and import, actually, from tkinter import simple dialog. We're going to talk about these things once we need them. We're also going to say host equals localhost again. If this is a real if this is a real scenario where the server is somewhere online, you would have to provide the public IP address here. You would have to provide the private IP address here, and then you would also have to open the ports on the server side. But in this case, it doesn't matter because it's localhost, and the port is going to be 9090. Now, the difference we're going to have here is that the client is going to be a class. So we're going to have it be an actual class, an actual object, and not just a script that we run. So we're going to say class client, and then we're going to define an init method, so a constructor. Here we're going to pass host and port. And in the constructor, what we're going to do is we're going to define socket first. So self.sock equals socket.socket sockets.af inet socket.sockstream again. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say self.sock. It's going to not bind this time, it's going to connect to the server this time. So we're going to connect to the tuple of host and port, like that. Actually, in this case, we don't provide the constants, we provide the parameters here, like that. So this is how we do it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to have a message box pop up so that we can enter our username or our nickname. So we're going to say message equals tkinter.tk, like that. This is just the window where we're going to have the file dialog in, and then we're going to say message.withdraw. So we just need some context. This is why we create this. Again, when it comes to GUI programming, my practices may not be best practice because I'm not really too much into GUI programming. I can build stuff, but I'm not sure if that's the cleanest or best way to do it. So please don't take this too seriously here. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say self.nickname is going to be simple dialog.ask string. So we're going to ask something in this dialog, and the result is going to be the nickname. And we're going to have the heading or the headline here, nickname, and then we're going to say, let me just see where we were. Please choose a nickname here, and then we're going to specify a parent as well. So please choose a nickname. And then we're going to say parent equals message. This is why we need a parent. This is why we needed to create this message, tkinter.tk and message.withdraw. Once we have that, we're going to set the GUI flag, so the set GUI done flag to false. Again, this is probably something that is not considered best practice, but what I do is I set this flag to false, then I build the whole GUI, and once this GUI is built, I can perform a certain type of operation. Before that, I cannot do it, so we could, this is kind of a lock or just a flag that tells you, okay, now you're allowed to do it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say self.running is also another flag. Running is going to be true by default. We're just going to set running to false when we try to stop everything. And then we're going to run two threads. So we're going to say the GUI thread is going to be threading.thread with a target to a function that we don't have yet. We're going to call this function GUI loop later on. So GUI loop, and then we also have a receive thread. So we're going to copy this here. We're going to change this to receive thread, and we're going to say this is the receive function, but this is another receive function. This is not the same receive function as the one in the server. So what we're going to do then is we're going to say GUI thread.start and receive thread.start. And then we're going to have def GUI loop here. This is just the functions we're going to use and the thread that we're going to use to build the whole GUI here. We're going to pass for now, and then we need a receive, which is like a handle function. We're just handling the connection. We're receiving new messages from the server. We can also have write and so on, but we're going to talk about this later on. So we're going to say receive self, and we're going to pass here as well. So now we have the basic structure. We have this constructor here. Now, actually, we need to say self.GUI loop because otherwise it's not going to work. Self.receive, like that. So what we have here is we create a client. This client has a socket. It connects to host and port. We can get a nickname from the user. Then we say, okay, the GUI is not yet built. The service or the connection is already running. Then we run those two threads, one which builds the GUI and maintains the GUI, and one which connects to the server, or actually it is already connected to the server, but that deals with the server connection. And those two functions are the ones that we need to implement now. All right, so let's start with the GUI loop function. Now, the GUI loop function is just going to build the graphical user interface, the front end. We're not going to have any logic or functionality in here. We're just going to say, okay, this is the button, this is a text box, this is a label. We're just going to create the front end. It's not going to have any functionality here. And the first thing we need to do in order to do this is we're going to say self.win equals tkinter.tk, the same way that we did it up here. And then we're going to say self.win.config, or actually configure. We're going to configure the background to be light gray. This is just a style thing. So if you're not interested in the whole style thing, you can skip all the colors and all the paddings and so on. You don't have to do them in all the fonts if you're just interested in a basic GUI. But I'm going to add some colors and paddings and font sizes here and there so that we have a little bit, a GUI that looks a little bit better. So the background is going to be light gray here. And what we're going to do then is we're going to add a label. So we're going to say self.chat label. It's going to be tkinter.label. the parent or the root is going to be self.window. And then we need the text. So we're going to say text is just chat, colon, and then we have the background here as well. Now this is important because just because the whole window has the light gray background doesn't mean that the individual components also have the light gray background. This means that if we now have this window here and we don't have background light gray here, this means that we're going to have a light gray background and the label is going to have a white background. So we want to do that as well so that everything blends together seamlessly. And then we're going to say self.chatlabel.config. And we're going to set the font to a tuple of Arial. I hope that's how it's pronounced. And 12, this is font family and font size. And then we're going to say self.pack. Actually self.chatlabel.pack, and we're going to add some padding. Again, this is just stylish, so this is or a style thing. This is not functionality here. So padding x equals 20 and padding y equals 5. And after that, we're going to want to have a big text area where we can input some text. So the idea again is that we want to have a chat label, then a big text box where we see the whole chat history. Then we want to have another label that says your input text. Then we want to have our text, and then we want to have a button for sending. So what we need next is the big text box with the chat history. So we're going to say caps lock, self.text area is going to be tkinter.scrolltext.scrolltext. Now this is important because when you have a chat, you don't want to be limited to your text box that you see. You want to be able to scroll, so we need this special type of a text box here, the scroll text. And here we're just going to say self.win as a parameter, which means that this is going to be the parent, or this is the parent. Self.text area, we're going to pack this as well with a padding of 20 and a padding of 5. And then one important thing is we want to set this to disabled. So text area.config, want to set the state to disabled. Now this is important because you don't want to be able, or the user should not be able to just put text into this text area. This is the history of the chat, so we don't want the user to just change what's in the chat history. We want the user to be able to input text and send it, but we don't want the user to be able to edit that text area here. However, this also has a downside, or a side effect that we need to take care of. When we set the state to disabled, we can also not change the content programmatically. So if we want to change the content of this text area, we need to first set the state to default, or enable it, so to say, and then change it and then disable it again. So this is what we need to keep in mind for later on. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this label here. We're going to say chat label, but it's not chat label, but it's, let's call it message label. And it's going to say message, like that. Then we want to have a text area with the input. So we're going to say self.input area. It's going to be tkinter.text, self.win, and height equals 3. Of course, feel free to adjust those values. You can have height 5, you can have padding 25, you can do whatever you want. You can pick red as a background color. This is just my preference for this particular video here. And then self-input area pack, and we're also going to add a padding here. And last but not least, we want to have a button, and the button is going to be called send button, tkinter.button, self.win as a root, and then text is going to be sent. And one thing that we now need to define here is the command of that button. The command refers to a function, and for this we're going to have the write function. We don't have that function defined yet, so actually self.write. So what we want to do is we want to say def write, and we're going to pass for now. But this function, this essentially means that when we click that button, this function is going to be called. And here we're going to say self.sendButton.config, And we're going to also set the font size here. And we're going to say self.sendButton.pack. And also the padding as usual. Now, after that, what we want to do is we want to say the GUI is now done. So give the signal to the other functions later on that the GUI is now done and we can do certain things with it. So GUI done equals true. And then we're going to also say self.win.mainLoop. So this is when we're done. Now it's going in a loop. Now, one thing that we might want to add here is what happens when we close the window, because right now, if we just close the window, it doesn't mean that the program terminates. So what we can do actually is we can say self.win.protocol, and we want to have the event wm_delete_window. What happens then is we want to call self.stop. Now, self.stop is a function that we don't have yet again. So we're going to say def stop self pass. So an alternative to this would be to just say, okay, this is going to run, like the GUI is the main thread and the connection thread or the receive thread is going to be a daemon thread in the background, which if it's the only thread running, we just, we cancel it. But I'm not sure if that would work perfectly. So this is one solution that definitely works. Whenever we close the window, we're going to call the stop function. The stop function is going to terminate the whole program. So let's quickly implement this stop function here. What we want to do is we want to say self.running equals false. We want to say self.win.destroy. And we want to close the connection. So self.sock.close. And then we want to exit with the exit code 0. So this is what we want to do here. Now, the write function is also quite simple. The only thing that we want to do is we want to get the text from the message box and we want to send it to the server, and then we want to clear the message box. So what we want to do is we want to say message equals formatted string. We want to say nickname. Now, this is one thing you can do it server side or you can do it client side. In this case, we're doing it client side, which means that instead of just sending the message, we're also sending the nickname. It would probably be more intelligent to just get the message, the pure message, and then say, okay, it was from that client and this client has this nickname. But it's not, I mean, you can do it in the client as well. So we're doing it in the client here. Self.nickname is going to be what we send to the server. Self nickname says whatever. So self nickname : and then what we do is the actual message, and the actual message is going to be whatever is in the input area. So we're going to say self.input_area.get. Now the notation here is a bit confusing maybe. 1.0 means we're just starting in the beginning and we're going up until the end like that. So this basically means get the whole text. And once we have that, what we do is we say self.sock.send, and we're going to send the message here encoded with UTF-8 like that. Now, then what we want to do is we don't want this, we don't want to keep the text in the text box, so we're going to clear that text box by saying self.input_area.delete, and we're going to delete everything from the beginning to the end, like that. So now finally, let's implement the receive method here. We're going to say while self.running. This is, by the way, why we need this self.running, because when we stop, we're also breaking this loop here. We're going to try something, and if it doesn't work, we're going to do some error handling here. And what we're going to try is we're going to try to get a message from the server. So message equals self.sock.receive 1024 bytes. And then we're going to check if this message here is equal to capital letters nick. So if the server is asking for the nickname, if it is asking for the nickname, we're going to say self.socket, or actually sock, send self.nickname encoding with UTF-8. Otherwise, we're going to process the message. Otherwise, it's an ordinary message and we're going to process it with the graphical user interface. However, before we change anything about the graphical user interface, we want to know that it's done with the building. Now, we can still receive it. In fact, we have received the message already, but before we change something about the graphical user interface, we wait for it to be finished. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say if self.GUI done. And then we're going to say self.textArea.config, and we're going to set the state of this thing to normal. So it was not default, it was normal, which means that we can now change it so that we can insert some text into it, the new text that we just got from the server, and then we have to set the state back to disabled. So self.insert, actually self.textArea insert, sorry. And we're going to not insert at position 1.0, we're going to insert at position end because we want to append the message at the end. And we're going to insert the message here. Then what we want to do is we want to say self.textArea.yView to end, which basically means that we're going to always scroll down to the end. So we're not going to just add new messages and stay at the same thing. We're going to go down with the messages. And after that, we're going to say self.textArea.config state equals disabled. Like that. Now, if we get a certain kind of error, so let's say we get a connection aborted error, we're just going to break. And if we get any other error, we're going to... Actually, I don't think that we even need anything special here. We're just going to... No, I think this was important because in this case, if it's another exception, we don't... we actually close the socket. In this case, it's already closed, I think. We're going to just do it like that. We're going to say break here as well. And maybe you want to print an error message here, just a very generic error message. And then we're going to say self.sock close, like that. Now, theoretically, you could go ahead and say, okay, self-running false and all that. But yeah, this is the basic receive method here. Now we can actually go ahead and try this. So we can actually go ahead and say client equals client connecting to, let's say, host and port. But since we don't have a server running yet, let's just comment out the individual, or actually let's go ahead and run a server. So we're going to say, we're here, right? Yeah. So we're going to say Python server.py, server is running, and we're going to connect with a client now. So as you can see, please choose a nickname. I'm going to enter my name here, Florian. And now I have this chat window here. On the server side, we can see connected with localhost. And here I can say hello world, like that. As you can see. Now let's run command line again. Programming Python neural 9. And let's run another client here. And we're going to call this neural 9. And you can see connected to the server. Hey. Oh, actually, we have a problem here because we're appending from the top down. Or are we actually appending? I think we forgot a \n somewhere. Let me just see yeah, we don't have the... Okay, so we connected to the server, but first of all, we don't have a \n there, so we don't have a line break there in the broadcast message. Where do we have one? Connected to the server. Actually, we do have a \n. However, you can see that the connection works. We're going to fix that bug in a second. We're going to talk about this. But you can see that the basic connection works here. We can connect with two clients, and I can chat here, so I can say hello, and I can say hello here. And you can see that this is a working GUI chat, and you can see on the server side in the back end here, we also have the log of what's happening. Okay, now the one thing that we forgot to do here is, of course, when we receive the message, we need to also decode it. So we need to say .decode UTF-8, but that is the only thing. So now the server is running. I connect with this client here. I call myself neural 9 and I join. So first of all, I can chat with myself. And then I can also run a second client here. Python client.py, and I can call myself Florian here. And first of all, you can see that I get the message Florian connected to the server. And here I can say hello, hello world, and so on. And now I can disconnect here and disconnect here as well. So that's it for today's video. Hope you enjoyed and hope you learned something. If so, let me know by hitting the like button and leaving a comment in the comment section down below. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell to not miss a single future video for free. One thing that I want to add here is that, by the way, just one little thing, you can also add a disconnected message here in the end. So you can say accept, and then you can say, okay, when a client disconnects, we're going to broadcast to everyone that this client has disconnected so that everyone knows this client now left. But that's just one thing you can modify. You can also take a look at my video called the Advanced Python Chat Room or Advanced TCP Chat Room in Python or something like that, where I have more features like kicking and banning and so on. So take a look at that if you're interested. And other than that, thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video and